We have the privilege this week of reading Parshas Bamidbar, the beginning of Bamidbar, the name of the book in English, or Latin, I don't know Latin, but in English it's Numbers, right? And it's, what?
Every time I see it in English, I go, what Parshat is that? Well, they did a lot of counting.
Yep, there is a lot of counting. There's a lot of, they say this in several Parshas, other Parshas only an accountant could love. And the question is why they count so many times. And, we're not going to talk about this so much, but it's the beginning of the story of the Midbar, and it's really the whole Sefer of Bamidbar is the one that takes up most of the time in the desert. If you think about from the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim until the beginning of the events that are described in the beginning of Parshas Midbar, it's less than a year, and from Parshas Bamidbar through the end of Bamidbar is 40 years, right? A lot of it, by the way, doesn't talk about it at all. We'll get to that in Parshas Chukas. There's a sort of a fast forward button where for 38 years nothing is talked about, and we talked about that in the past. But it describes somehow that there's a Midbar experience, and one question that one might have is, why was it necessary to be in the Midbar for so long? Now, of course, the simple answer is they weren't supposed to be there so long. They were supposed to just go to Sinai, and then, as it says, within just a few days, be in Eretz Yisrael. But Hakadosh Baruch Hu obviously knows what's going to happen, and we usually, that question can almost always be asked that he already knew this was going to happen beforehand, and so for some reason it seemed to be that it was an important formative experience, and as we'll see, it wasn't the only similar kind of experience in Jewish history. And it's what we did have in the Midbar, in that Midbar at least, seems in some way to be a little bit of an idyllic existence. You had the Mishkan in the center. You had all of the various tribes camped around them, right? In a very ordered way, very close by. Everybody knew, just down the street there. That's where the Beis Hamikdash is. That's where not the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan. That's where Moshe is. That's where the Leviim are. Everything was in fairly close proximity. And originally, when I was doing this, I was listening to a shiur by Rabbi, what's his name? Baruch Rosenblum. He went into all the mystical connotations of why they had different, why they were ordered that way. After all, it's why you had this particular group and that particular group and the other group, and that they were the groups that we had, which were basically one group was Reuven, Shimon, and God, right? One of them was Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zevulun. One of them was Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin, and the other one was Dan, Naphtali, and Asher, on the various sides. And they were specifically that side. One of them is pretty clear why that is. That's Menashe, Ephraim, and Binyamin were all the sons of Rachel. But all the other ones seem a little bit random. Why particularly those? But they were the one who established those, and Rashi goes into that, was Yaakov Avinu. That was the grouping in which he ordered that his descendants should carry him on the procession towards his funeral, which, as we mentioned when we talked about it, was arguably the biggest funeral in history. It took almost a half a year, and then they were carrying him that whole way, and they had to go precisely in this way. I mean, even if it was a shorter time, it was a long way to carry 3 on this time. That's the way they had it. And Yosef didn't carry, and then all sorts of things. And the Medrash goes wild with all of this. That there's the four sides. One thing he said, which is interesting, I thought, he said that you could say that the Reuven, Yehuda, Dan, and Ephraim are the letters of Adir. So how you can remember the four camps.
They were the heads.
Adir, the heads of the 4 camps. And when we say Adir, Adirenu, we're talking about on Kedusha, where Kedusha is all about what we do, the way the Balachim do it, in the Kadesh Shubcha Ba'olam, Keshem Shabbat B'Shibot Tov B'Shmei B'Arom. Let us sanctify Hashem the way they do it up in heaven. And on Yontif we mention adir that is also up in heaven. There's a whole thing in the Midrash that we say there's 4 malachim on the 4 sides. When do we say that? A lot of people say the Kriyash with me, Mimini Michael, Mismoni Gabriel, Mifanai Uriel, Milofchayach Uriel, and the Medrash puts it that together that Yehuda is with Gabriel, and Reuven is with Michael, and Ephraim is with Raphael. 3, and on, and they're also the 4 faces of the Kisei HaKavod. Again, I'm not going to go into all that. It got very complicated and very mystical and very esoteric and way beyond my pay grade. But but basically his main point was that there was a very celestial, just like in the Mikdash below, the Mikdash above. They were concentrated and they were reflective of each other, and there was a very holy time. So in one sense, it was a holy thing to be in the Mishkan. And then what did they do afterwards? After finally the whole Midbar process goes through, of course we went to Eretz Yisrael, and then what happened in Eretz Yisrael? Soon after, they worked together for a couple of years as conquerors of the land, but soon, basically, some people went to Afula, and some people went to Beersheba, and some people went to Ramat HaGolan, and some people went Tzfat, and yes, there was actually at that time there wasn't Yerushalayim. For hundreds of years, it was Shiloh, was where the Mishkan was, and then eventually it was in Yerushalayim. But if in some ways was as you can imagine, and as you see throughout Sefer Shoftim, right, again and again and again, what happens, and then through the period of the Malachim for sure, that people lived wherever they lived. Ish kol hayashar be'einav yaseh. That phrase appears many times in Sefer Shoftim. That people basically started doing what they wanted to do, and things got a little messed up from the perspective of holy things. And I'm sure certain people didn't trust this one's hechsher, and that one didn't trust that one because they didn't hold it while standing by the right standards, and all those kinds of other things. But in more serious senses, it was a problem. And the question is, which is the more ideal way to live? Is it more ideal to live really in the Mishkan, right there, together, close together, with Moshe Rabbeinu eating the man in the Anani HaKavod, or spread all over in Eretz Yisrael, all over the place where each person had that? And of course, the answer is clear that the way that Hashem wants us to live is in Eretz Yisrael. The Mishkan was in fact, and the Midbar was a temporary device. But the point of the Torah and the point of Hashem is not that we should live in a divorce from reality, which in many ways the Mishkan experience was. The Mishkan was an experience in which people didn't have to work, they ate the man, they had their slav, they had they didn't engage in life. Hashem wants us to engage in life. That's why He put us in this world, to be able to engage with the world, but to do so al pi Torah. But in a way, it seems to be a step down, and that's not our topic tonight. But some say that one of the main reasons that the Meraglim, there's a coming attraction in a few weeks, right? One of the reasons the Meraglim, who we're told were great people, right? Hoshea b'nei Yisrael hema. They were the Rosh Hashivas, if you want. They were the big people. They weren't in the scene, but they were great people. Why did they go rogue? Why did they try to convince people not to go into Eretz Yisrael? The various ideas, and one idea that some say is because of this very reason. They felt, here, this is an ideal life. Here, people are and what if people are basically learning all day? People are busy with mitzvahs all day. They don't have to engage with other things. Who needs Eretz Yisrael? Let's stay here in the Midbar or Lakewood or wherever, right? What do we need to go to Eretz Yisrael for? And that's why they did what they did, according to some opinions. But nevertheless, that was not the way it was supposed to be. The Midbar was supposed to be sort of a training ground in which we learned a certain closeness with Hashem, and then we'd be able to go into Eretz Yisrael and really experience it. It didn't work out that way too well, but in the long run. But there are different times that's what's happening, and I think that's important for us understanding the Midbar and why Dafka. The Midbar is this Parsha of Parshas Bamidbar, and the experience of the Midbar is something that we always have to read before Shavuos. It's always, Parshas Bamidbar is always before Shavuos. 90% of the time it's immediately before, like this year. Once in a blue moon, it's Parshas Naso is the one before, with the vagaries of the calendar. But Bamidbar is always before Shavuos. And the reason that Bamidbar is always before Shavuos, one of the reasons is, I wrote about an article about this, by the way, if you, based partially on that and what we talked about last week, I'll send a copy along, is that we're supposed to accept the Torah based on a Midbar type of experience. What's in a Midbar? Nothing. That's exactly the point. It's a wilderness, it's barren, it's bare, and what aren't there? There aren't all my preconceptions, there aren't all my other ideas, there aren't all of, this, that. There's nothing there. That's the way we're supposed to approach the Torah, on its own, not to bring all my baggage with me, so to speak. Right? We should be able to approach the Torah that way. So the Midbar is a good training ground for that. And it's very interesting that we find several times in history this idea comes up again. One of them is in the Haftorah, we're not going to read the Shabbos. Right? Why are we not going to read the Shabbos? Because Rosh Chodesh is on Sunday. So we read Machar Chodesh. But nevertheless, the Haftorah is a very interesting Haftorah. I only made like 5 or 6 copies, so I have to share some. It's the second chapter of Hoshea. Who is Hoshea, by the way? He's the first of the 12 Treyasar. But the Treyasar might have been the reason that they're called the 12. They may be shorter books, but they're not any less important. And Hoshea, in many ways, was one of the most important Nevi'im. And we read several Haftorahs from Hoshea. This one, and probably the most famous one, this is like the first chapters of Hoshea. The last chapter of Hoshea we read twice a year, actually. One of them famously as the Haftorah of Shabbos Shuvah Yisrael ad Hashem Lokecha. It's from Hoshea. He was a Rebbe of Yeshaya, and according to some opinions, he was a very chashuv person. So, and the Haftorah starts at the beginning of chapter 2, according to their counting, right? And we, as we've talked about a few times, the chapters are not from a Jewish origin, but we're going to read it from the beginning, or the beginning of chapter 1. I'm sorry, I think in the photocopy, the first line might have gotten cut off. And I'll read it though. It doesn't say that much that you're not missing out. The basic says Hashem spoke to Hoshea at the beginning of the time of Uzziah and Yosam and Achaz and Chizkiah. That's when Hoshea lived, which was similar to the time Hoshea lived and Hoshea lived. Okay, and Tchilas Devar Hashem b'Hoshea. This is the first thing Hashem to Hoshea. Hashem said to Hoshea. Is that already on the page there? Okay, Hashem said to Hoshea, he said to him a very interesting thing. Kach lecha eshet zenunim. Take for you a woman who is a wife of harlotry. Okay. Go down to the red light district, get yourself a wife. Right? Okay. Then what you should be with her. Very behave. Now we're talking here again about a great tzaddik and a navi, etc. But that's what he was told to do. The Yalde Zindunim, and she's going to have with you, right? You should, as it says in English, beget, not as in loaf of bread, but a beget, children of harlotry, right?
Which pasuk are you on?
I think it's the first line that you have there. It's the end of Parshat Bamidbar.
Top of the page, yeah.
Top of the page is chopped off. I apologize. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Right? And have that. Why? Ki zano tizne haaretz me'acharei Hashem, because the land has been mezaneh from before Hashem. What does it mean, mezaneh? What does the word mean? It means, as it translates here in English, to liznot means to stray, to turn off for the way that we're supposed to be. The Jewish people have strayed, and I want to demonstrate in a very dramatic, odd, shocking, if you will, way, just how God feels about the Jewish people at this point in time. They've been mizana, and so therefore the leader should take a zona. Similar, by the way, to the beginning of Yecheskel, if you're familiar. He also is told to sit up on top of a hill and stand there with a brick and show that Hashem has turned. Strange stories. Okay, so the Nevi'im didn't just that preached, they also had to do things sometimes. What did he do? Vayikach et Gomer bat Latayim, the famed Divlayim. I guess she was the harlot of the day, and she had a child for him. And then Hashem spoke to him. He said, "Call his name Yisrael." That should be famous to us, right? We are in the city that calls itself the capital of the Israel, right? So, what is the word Yisrael? Yisrael, it means God will plant. But it also here the Pasuk takes it a different way. Ki od ma'at ufakadati estemei Yisrael abeit Yehu. I will avenge the blood of Israel for the house of Yehu. V'hishpati malchut beis Yisrael. The malchut beis Yisrael, which is up here. This was in the area of the 10 tribes up in this part of right up or in the north, right? That would be that they'll be avenged. And what will happen? They will have a fight in Emek Israel, exactly where we are, and the Jewish people will be broken. Okay, that's son number 1. Son number 2, Vataharod Vateled Bat. Then she had a daughter. Vayomer Lo, and he said to him, Kurashma, what you call her? Lo Ruchama. Right? Not Ruchama, but Lo Ruchama. What does that mean? The one I do not have mercy on. Lo Ruchama. Ki lo osif aod arachem et Beit Yisrael. I will not have any mercy anymore on Beit Yisrael. Ki naso esa lahem. I'm going to give it to them. Beit Yehuda arachem. I'll have mercy on the house of Yehuda. V'oshatem, and I will save them, etc. Okay. Vatigman. Then I speaking a little. Vatigbol et Ruchama. She weaned Lo Ruchama, and then she had another son, and he had even a better name. Vayikra yomer kra shemo Lo Ami. Not my nation. Ki atem lo ami v'anochi lo ehyeh lachem, and you are not my nation, and I will not be for you either. Right? Quite the stirring message, and this is over obviously a considerable amount of time. How long it takes to have 3 children? I don't know, at least 3 years, I suppose. Okay, so pretty wild stuff that Hoshea is supposed to be doing. And of course, why is he doing this? He's doing this because, not because he's supposed to sit in his house and do it, but because everybody's going to hear about it. And it's going to spread amongst all the populace that Hoshea, the great tzaddik, look at the wife he had to choose, look at the children he has, it's Lo Ruchama and Lo Ami and Levi, right? It's a terrible thing. Okay.
Wait, did he just make a point? He just married the wrong woman to make a point?
So he's making a point, as he says, that I am not, you are acting as if you're not my people, so I will not be your God anymore.
It was commanded.
What?
God was commanded.
Relationship is over.
Commanding him to do this, okay. But
He was working on instructions.
What?
He was working on instructions.
Instruction?
Hashem's telling him this. Like,
Yeah. Hashem's telling him to do this.
Okay.
Shocking, but Hashem is telling him to do this, right? Okay.
I remember getting a similar message once.
A lot of men have felt that way. Okay. And then we have an interesting pasuk that sort of goes in. I guess that's why they decided this is a new chapter. And that's where the Haftorah, if we would read it, starts. Okay, the beginning of chapter 2. But the time will come that the Jewish people will come and they like the sands of the sea that will not be counted and not be measured. And in the place, instead of be calling them, you're not ami, they'll be called my people. Okay. Some say, by the way, why is this a Haftorah of Parshas Bamidbar? Those are looking. Usually, both people look for a simple connection. Here's a simple connection. That's about counting. Here, they're counting. But of course, I think it's much more than that. Okay, as we shall see. Okay, what will happen? V'nikbitzu b'nei Yehuda v'nei Yisrael yachdav v'samu lahem rosh echad v'alu min haaretz ki gadol yom Yisrael. The people of Yisrael and Yehuda, the 2 kingdoms, will get together, and they will try to come up to the land. And they will say the day of Israel is great. Not so clear what that means, but I won't go on that now. And tell your brother you are Ami. Ruchama, and your sister is called Ruchama. And those actually are 2 names that we have today. Ruchama is a pretty popular name, and Ami also is I know Rav David Cohen has some name Ami. I don't know if there's other people left. Okay. So, and then when they get together and getting their a little bit understanding that they're understanding something's wrong here, then rivu be'imchem rivu, you should fight against your mother. More great advice, right? Rivu be'imchem rivu, we're fight against your mother. Ki hi lo ishti, va'anochi lo isha. She's not my wife, and I'm not her husband. In other words, that Hoshea should say that to her. In the way that she's been acting as basically a prostitute, a woman who has loose morals. That's not the way we should be together. V'taser zenuneha mipaneha v'nafufeha mibein shadeh. She should get rid of all of her harlotry. Penaf shiten aruma, lest I strip her bare v'hatzaktiyav kiyom mivoldans, and place her like her birthday suit, I guess. V'samtiha ka Midbar, and I will make her like a Midbar. Here we're getting the first desert thing. V'shatia ka eretzia v'hamitiya batzama, and she will be less, and she will almost have to cause her to die of thirst, and I won't have mercy on her children. And because kizansa imam habisha harosam, right? Because the mother has strayed, she has embarrassed them. Because she said, Elcha acharei me ahavai, I will go after my lovers, nosnei lachmi umeimi tzamri mishli, those who give me my bread and my water and my wool and my flax, shamni v'shikuyai, my oil and my drink, right? Lachein hineni sachet archike. So it's, in other words, what's going on over here? That she will come to a time that she is going to, finally, he's going to stand up against her, and he's saying, "You're not my wife. You're not acting in the way of a wife." But she's going to say, "It's okay. I don't need you. I'm going to take all those lovers, those other men who are with me, who wanted me, who took me, and they're going to take care of me. All the people who gave me this, but they treated me nicely. And you, the cuckolded husband, so to speak, forget about you. We don't need you."
This is all metaphorical, right? Is it literal?
Yes and no. I mean, Hoshea really did have to do that. But the message he's trying the message he's supposed to send is a metaphorical one about the whole Jewish people as a whole.
No, but this is just an example. He's like using this person as an example. Okay,
yeah.
It's very strange.
It's very strange. It's a very, very strange Torah, right? It's a Haftorah we often don't read because, like, we don't read it this year, but it's a one-time cycle, right? And she's going to say that, and this happens, of course, a lot of times when a man or a woman stray. First, they think their lover is going to take care of them, etc., etc. But as soon as things wear off and things get complicated, often, she thinks she's going to get from him. And what happens? That your way will go with thorns, and you won't be able to find your way, and you will run. She'll run after her lovers. She won't be able to reach them. Because she looked for them and won't find them, and then she's stuck, right? She left her husband. She's for these lovers. She's straying with them, but at this point they have their fun with her. Now they throw her out. They don't want anything to do with her anymore. They see her as this thing. So at that point she says, "She amra elcha ve'ashuva alishi harishon." Let me go back to my husband, right? Kitov li azmeata. She realizes I had it better than I have it now.
It's very reflective.
Right, very reflective, okay. Maybe just you too, right?
Eicha.
What?
It's not mirroring Eicha, it's the pre-Eicha. It's all the same things going on, and Eicha is when it's actually happening again.
Yeah. Well, Hoshea was a long time before. It was at least about 150 years before the Korban. But things were, in the days of those kings, a lot of bad things were happening, of course. Okay, and she said that she didn't know she didn't know that in fact it was I who gave her all the good things that she had beforehand. She never appreciated it, according to the second page. Okay, and therefore I'll take my grain in its time, and I'll take all those things, and I will give it to her to cover herself. Okay, and that I gave to her at the time, he's saying, Now, Agalat Mivlasa Le'nei Mahaver, now in front of all of our lovers, we'll be seeing our ugliness will be shown, that how surface her all the beautiful things that she thought she had were, it's all going to be shown to be ugliness. V'yesh lo yatzilena, no man is going to be interested in her. And I will return to her all of the parties that she did, Chaga, Chodsha, V'Shabbata, and even it's a reference here, a lot of times, unfortunately, when we have our Shabbos and Moed and Chagim, those are some of the difficult psukim in Tanakh where Hashem says, when you come and you don't come in the right way to the Beis Hamikdash, and you figure, I can do whatever I want, and then I come to the Beis Hamikdash and throw some meat at you, God. Hashem says, basically, Mi bikesh those from Yukem Ramos Chatzeroi is a famous verse in the beginning of Yeshaya says, who needs you here to trample my courtyard? Get out of here. It's who needs you here? Okay, and this is going, and again, skipping a little bit, the end of just before the break there, Batad Bizma v'chal Yasah batelech achrei ma'aveha. She went after her lovers, and she had forgotten them. Okay, does Hashem, is he done with us? Sounds like he's pretty done with us at that point. But Hashem is Hashem, and he has a covenant with us, etc. And in this case, it's a very beautiful way that he wants to repair the relationship. There are other times, Yecheskel's time already, he says, with fire and brimstone, basically, I'm going to rule over you, no matter what. But here, let's see what happens. It says, Lachein hineni mefateha. I'm going to seduce her. I'm going to speak nicely to her. And how am I going to do it? Holachtiha hamidbar. I'll take her out to the desert. Okay? V'dibarti al liba, and I'll speak to her heart. V'nasati la'et krameha misham, and I will give her the vineyards that she needs from there in the desert. V'emek achor lepetach tikva. This is in talking about the place near Tel Aviv. There's going to be a place out there which was a valley that was troubling, and I'm going to turn it into Petach Tikva,
That's
which
where they
means
got
to
the name
be,
from.
right?
Oh.
Yeah, but Petach Tikva means the beginning of hope. The beginning of hope. They will once again hope again. V'yansa Shama ki meinu ureha, and she will once again come and dwell there as in the days of her youth, right? And the days of her youth will be Yikiyom Alosam Eretz Yisrael. In other words, when? This week's Parshat, or the whole Sefer Bamidbar. We're going to go back to the desert experience. That's really the main connection with Parshas Bamidbar, right? That we're going to go back to the desert. That's the place which we can repair, renew, and rejuvenate this terribly broken relationship. And what's going to happen when we do that, right? He says, the Hasiros, and then the Hayaba Yom Hahu, on that day, Tikri'i, Ne'um Hashem Tikri'i Ishi, once again, you will call me he's my man, my husband. But Lo Tikri'i or Ba'ali, such a beautiful pasuk. You will call me Ishi, not Ba'ali, which means he's my man, not my Baal. I mean, Hebrew, Baal means husband, but Baal really also means owner, right? It's more of a legal sense kind of thing, but not. This is going to be a much more personal sense. And I will take away Shmos HaBa'alim. I will take away the names of the Ba'alim. The Baal, of course, was one of the main Avodah Zarahs during those times, right? I'm going to take those away. What does that mean? Why do they call that Avodah Zarah Baal? What was it about? That there are different other things. That this Avodah Zarah is the master of this, the master of that. Why serve God? He's this Avodah Zarah is the master of whether there's going to be rain, crops, etc. Going to get rid of all those Ba'alim. You can only have V'lo yizachar od b'shmam. They will not be mentioned anymore. V'charati lahem bris v'yamhu, and once again I will have a covenant with her, together with Chayas HaSadeh and Malach HaShamayim, out in the wilderness with the animals, and all of us, and war, etc. will go away from the land. V'yishkavtim lavetach, and they will lay down securely. And then a pasuk, at least the men in the room know very well. We say it every morning as we're wrapping our tefillin. Ve'yirastichli le'olam. I will betroth thee forever. Ve'yirastichli b'tzedek u'v'mishpat u'v'chesed u'v'rachamim. I will betroth you with kindness and with justice and with righteousness and with mercy. And I will betroth you with, once again, with faith, and you will know Hashem. And again, it goes on, etc. The subsequent psukim Israel is going to be fixed. It's not going to be called Lo Ruchama. It's going to be called Ruchama. Not going to be called Lo Ami. It's going to be called Ami, etc., etc. And he goes on from there. So a very interesting and stirring chapter.
Talking about the Geula then, or the Geula of Acharis Hayam, like soon.
It's hard to know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. I mean, I don't know that in Hoshea's time they didn't go to the Midbar, and I don't know that they really repaired things that well. But I think and I'm not sure what his eventual relationship was with this Chaleya that he married and the children that he had. I don't know how that resolved. Doesn't really say, as far as I know. But it certainly is, as you say, a metaphor for the way Hashem wants to bring us back, and it's interesting that we brought back Dafka through the Midbar. And why is it important after it looked like it was hopeless before? Like that relationship was about as broken as a relationship gets.
Which relationship?
The relationship between the husband and the wife, and Hashem and the Jewish people, as Hoshea spoke about there, as with the psukim that we read. You're not my people. I don't want you anymore. We're gone. You rejected me. Go and find your lovers. Leave me alone. Right. And see, I'm gonna reject you and all that. But through the Midbar somehow it can come back.
Let's go back to before we had all this baggage.
Yeah. So that really is the message here. We're going back before all this baggage, before things got messed up. Going back to a place again where the Midbar is a place without all that other stuff and all the other things and all the distractions and all the preconceptions and all the biases and all the whatever. We have to get rid of all those things. We have to realize they're not really ours. There's a famous Hasidic story about I remember Rabbi Gottlieb used to tell the story of it, where a chassid was sitting on a train and there's a suitcase like blocking the aisle next to him, and the conductor comes by and he says, "Get rid of that suitcase, put it away." And the chassid's busy singing a tune. Right? Okay. The conductor comes by a few minutes later, right? And he says, "I told you to get moving with the suitcase." And the chassid's going, "If you don't get rid of it, I'm going to throw it off." Okay. The chassid comes back the third time, and he says, "It's still there." Okay, takes it, throws it out the window. And then the chassid continues singing, "It's not my bag, it's not." No, I don't know if that was very nice to whoever's bag it was. He never addressed that part of the story. But his point in telling the story was, there's a lot of stuff around that we have to realize that's not my bag. That's maybe near me, maybe part looking like this part of me. We have to be able to put that baggage aside. It's not really part of who I am. But here in this thing, that's certainly part of what's happening over here in this story in Bamidbar. I don't want to go too late. We have to go a little late because we started very late. But I'll just say briefly, there's one could connect this. First of all, like I said, with other times. There's a time in Micha which he talks about that Hashem taking us out to the Midbar. There's a time in Yecheskel Hashem taking us out to the Midbar, and in many ways, the Meshech Chachma, in the famous piece, which I think last year when on Parshas B'chukosai we read it in the whole thing at length. It's probably the most famous essay. If you're familiar with the Meshech Chachma, on most places he has like a fairly short, a paragraph or two of commentary. In a couple of places he goes into a whole long essay. So this is probably the most famous one, and he has it about the Tochacha. And the reason that it's so famous is because in the Tochacha he says that the time will come that people will get so far away that they're even going to say that Berlin is Jerusalem, right? And they say what that was like Ruach HaKodesh, Nevuah, because he said it and he died in 1926. Obviously it was before that, but sort of being misnabe what's going to happen. Now I don't think it was Nevuah. I think if you're familiar with what he was really talking about there, it was that he was basically commenting on the people who said Berlin is Jerusalem was the Reform at the time, right? Had come out with that concept. We're not interested in Jerusalem, and I'm just going back. Berlin is not Jerusalem now. He was just commenting on look how far we've gotten. But okay, be that as it may. But the important part of this essay is it's a beautiful description of how history works in cycles. And in particular, I'm not going to take the time to read the whole. It's a long thing, and it's worth reading through. But basically, what he says is that there are times that we came. Yaakov Avinu he begins that. Skipping this part. He says that when we were in Eretz Yisrael, we have to remember that in Eretz Yisrael, in a way, things were great. Things were wonderful. Things we had particularly in the Beis Hamikdash, right? Beis Hamikdash was great not only because it was the place that they brought korbanos, they did Avodas Hashem. It was also the place of the Sanhedrin. It was also the place where the Melech often, when he had something to say to the people, he would say it there. So, in a sense, it was the seat of the judicial, legislative, and I guess the theological center of the Jewish people. It was the Kiryat HaMemshalah, as they say today, the center of government. It was, and that was the place, and people came and they were around it and they understood it. But a lot of times, as we mentioned before, what happens is people go and they move and they other places and they kind of forget about the center. But in those days, things could be corrected because you had a Sanhedrin, you had Nevi'im, you had people who could address things that went wrong, and they could do something about it. But what happened, of course, the Seinu Rabbim, we lost the Beis Hamikdash. Hashem had to let us go out into the Gullus. And then what happens is that the next part of Jewish history, which is what's been going on for the last 2,000 years, really until our time, when Baruch Hashem we've gone into the next stage of Jewish history, is in the Isaac Covenant, as I like to call it, if you know what I'm talking about. But through this whole time, we've been wandering in different places, and what we've happened is, he says that we would go from place to place, and where Hashem would have us go and reorient ourselves. We would go somewhere. Just read a few verses over here. Hine derech ha'ashkacha. The hashkacha was ki yanuchu meshach shanim karov lamea o masayim. They would sometimes be in a place 100 years, 200 years, and after that would come ruach sarah, a storm would come. Yafut samon galav would make a lot of noise, and it would begin yaharos yishtof la'echmol. It would give all sorts of problems and would cause destruction. Ad ki nifzarim b'dudim, until we were scattered from them. Yarutsu yivruchu l'makam rachok, and the Jews would have to run away and go to a new Anatevka, somewhere else, right? And v'sham yisachadu, over there they would get together. They would come again a people, chachmasam yasuchil, they would begin to exercise their chachma, they would open yeshivas, they would open all sorts of wonderful things, etc. And they would come, right, to a place of yuchnis, until again, Ruach od yoter chazak, another storm would come, and would tell him, Yehudi ata umisam chala'ish, you're a Jew, who made you important, lech lecha l'eretz shelo yadata, go somewhere else. So it will happen time after time throughout the history. And it was in a way Hashem's, right, etc., right, and Hashem's way of keeping us going. Because we got too comfortable and too full, so we forget who we are. We forget that Eretz Yisrael is important. We forget, even if we have the opportunity to Eretz Yisrael, that we forget about that. And we go ahead, we sit, we start again, and we start learning. But what will happen is Yiskadru neged avosam. He has a very interesting psychological, if you will, thought here, which is that every generation needs to make their mark. Every generation needs to feel that we did something beyond what our parents did. We have to, if we're just going to do what, because in many ways we have to do something that's new. We have to produce something. We have to do something, and it'll go on, right? As we see in every generation, and that's not the way he says that. There's a tension between that, very interesting, and Torah, right? Because Torah, we're not necessarily supposed to come up with nothing new every generation. Our job is to basically to keep the Masorah, to keep the old ways, to apply it to new situations. Okay, yes, we're supposed to have Chidushei Torah, I suppose, but in general, we're not supposed to reinvent things. But it's a natural human inclination that we want progress, right? And in Chutz La'aretz, we were placed not like Eretz Yisrael. We didn't have a Sanhedrin, we didn't have Yom Kippur, we didn't have all sorts of things, right? We didn't have Hashem there, right? And it's just It's a really fantastic essay. It needs to be learned in a long time. But comes but then there'll come a certain time, he says, that in each generation when the Torah, even in the Torah world, people are keeping Torah, but they'll feel we've gotten to a place we're never going to know as much as the previous generation. We're never going to be able to do as much as the previous generation. Say what's going to happen, and then what are they going to do to make their mark? And sometimes that will happen, that people will come up with all sorts of new ideas, that new ways of acting. I mean, in Israel you don't see it so much. I know as a rabbi in America, a lot of the stuff I had to deal with was with a lot of the new ideas that were coming into Orthodox Judaism.
Open Orthodox.
Right? What?
Open Orthodox.
Open Orthodox, women's been rabbis, women's been all sorts of quinoa, all sorts of
What's next?
things that people had to come and have their new way, and sometimes they were okay, but sometimes it was a big problem, and we forgot what will happen, and then etc. And here's where he says that Yavah Ruach Sovasara, and it will again take us away when we think that Yachshov ki Berlin hu Yerushalayim, when we think that that's going to happen, that Berlin is Jerusalem. Eventually, things are going to turn away. But basically, the point is that he's saying in this that it gets to a point, and it's interesting that we get to a point when Tigal Nafshi Etchem. Last week, when I we have every Shabbos, Baruch Hashem, the kids are still calling us to wish us good Shabbos. So we give a bracha, and I used to try to come up. I usually try to come up with something a little bit different every week and say, yeah. Can I have the traditional bracha? That goes on. So I guess they're not so impressed by my brachas. But last week my bracha for them was, I shouldn't be disgusted by you. And why did I say that? I said, first of all,
That is a warm spot.
you should have all the brachas of in Parshas Bamidbar and none of the curses. But why? Because one of the brachas is V'natzati mishkani b'tochechem. I should live amongst you. V'lo tigal nafshi etchem. And I shouldn't be totally revolted by you. That's a bracha,
Totally.
right? Now, how is that a bracha? There's lots of commentary on it, but one simple idea of why it's a bracha is because if we think about how great HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, he's the Melech, Malchei, Amlachim, the infinite, the Ein Sof, the Ribbon Shalom, etc. That he's this great being, and look at us, puny, limited, shallow beings, and yet he seems to want us, right? He wants to have a relationship with us. I always, I tend to get emotional on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. There's a beautiful tefillah that we say during both Shachar and Musaf. It's called Asher Ometz Tehilasecha, or in Musaf it's called Asher Emasecha. Basically, it goes and compares us and the Malachim. And it says that Hashem has these incredible malachim who are. It goes on to describe how fantastic they are. They fly and they this and they have so much power. Yet, and they're up there with him. Yet, v'avisa tehila, you still want prayers from us. Limited people, faulty, etc. And that is your prayer, God, that you choose to want, a relationship with us, limited, faulty beings, and that's a beautiful thing. I think it's just such a beautiful, again and again, that contrast, which is drawn in that tefillah, and that's really the thing of lo tigal nafshi etchem. That's the greatest blessing that Hashem should want to be with us. Actually, that's a very important prayer that we say in every Shmona Esrei. Where do we say it? Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu be'amcha Yisrael tefillah. We say all these prayers, but we say, Hashem, you should want our prayers. What does he need our prayers for? Right? Besides the fact that he's heard it all so many times, etc. But the fact that he should want it, right? And that's a tremendous, as the Israelis would say, lo muvan me'elav. It's not at all self-understood that he would, that he wants that. So, as the Meshech Chacham is saying here, and I think as it's saying in Hoshea, that sometimes when we get too full of ourselves and other things, it's said in all kinds of ways, the only way back is to go into that desert. And we have to go back into the basics and go back into the wilderness and go back into getting rid of all that other stuff that took us away. And in the Hoshea's case, in this Haftorah, was an extreme case, obviously. They're very far away from where they ought to be. But all of us, in each in their own way, know that there are times when I shouldn't say all of us, of course, we're sitting here with some tzaddikim who maybe it doesn't apply to, but at least I'll talk only about myself. We get to things, and we get involved with all kinds of shtuyot and nonsense and wasting time with and getting involved in all sorts of things that feel important. And sometimes there's special times, especially now before Matan Torah, or after all, that's Matan Torah, where we accepting, realizing that Hashem gave us a Torah, and that was an unbelievable privilege, and that Hashem gave us to that Hashem wants to have that relationship with us. He wants to. In fact, in many places, the Kabbalah Torah is compared to a chuppah, compared to a place where Hashem, so to speak, marries us. He says, "Ve'erastikli le'olam, ve'erastikli b'tzedek u'mishpat, ve'erastikli b'munah." Hashem is betrothing us. But in order for us to do that, we have to sometimes go through back to the Midbar experience, get rid of all that stuff, and then we'll be able to approach Matan Torah and the Kabbalah Torah in the right way, and center ourselves once again. And hopefully we can stay out of the Midbar for a long time. We won't need that treatment again for so much. Okay.